What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and the race for the number one overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft is on. The Giants, at one point, for a brief amount of time, did hold the number one pick in the 2025 NFL Draft following their loss to the Carolina Panthers last week, but a lot has changed since then. The Giants didn't play this week, so there were a lot of teams that won, there were a lot of teams that lost, and ultimately, the Giants ended up falling all the way down now to fourth place. They were fifth place for a time, but shout out to the Dallas Cowboys for being terrible, for losing to the Texans last night. That loss changed the strength of schedule for both the Giants and the Cowboys and moved the Giants up the draft board to fourth overall, which is fantastic. The Giants' strength of schedule is very high, which means that their tiebreaker is not so great. The odds of them actually dropping all the way down to pick number one, pretty slim to none, but there is a path to get there. And that's what we're going to discuss in today's episode, how the Giants could wind up with the highest draft pick possible. And again, prefacing this by saying there's a lot of competition for the number one overall pick this year. There are some really terrible football teams in the league this season. This is like the biggest disparity between good teams and bad teams that we've seen in an NFL season in a very long time. A lot of 2-win teams, a lot of 8-win teams as well, 7-win teams. So there's been some really great teams, there's been some really bad teams, just not a whole lot in the middle. And because of that, the Giants are going to struggle to get the highest draft pick while still winning games down the stretch, because it sounds like Brian Daboll needs to win games down the stretch. However, the Giants, if they want that top draft pick, they can't really afford to win games down the stretch. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes and how this shakes out. But again, diving into some of the schedules of these other teams today to give you guys a clear picture on what the path to the number one or number two or number three overall pick looks like in the 2025 NFL Draft. Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about the Giants in this race for the number one pick?
Man, it's going to be an interesting next 8 weeks for the most part. I mean, obviously the Giants play the Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield, obviously a good offense. Their defense is suspect, but, obviously everything turns to Tommy DeVito. What is he going to do for this offense? Is he going to be better than Daniel Jones? Is he going to be worse? Is he going to be the same? We just don't know just yet, but we will certainly be finding out over the next couple of weeks. But I'll tell you what, right now the Giants have the fourth overall selection, right? Jacksonville's in front of them, Tennessee's in front of them, Cleveland's in front of them, and then you have the Vegas Raiders at 5. So there are two best case scenarios, one of them being like the best case that if the Giants don't have the first overall pick. So the best case scenario for the Giants, if we want the quarterback that we choose, it's going to be to get the first overall pick. For that to happen, it's going to require a lot, right? You need Jacksonville to win a game. You need Tennessee to win a game. You need Cleveland to win a game. You need the Giants to lose out, basically. We can't win another game. That's the only way this Giants team is going to escape, the reality of having to move up in this draft and selling the farm. Now, the Dallas Cowboys, if you watched yesterday's game, they're very bad. Very, 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 very bad. I mean, the Texans are also very good, so there's that. But the Dallas Cowboys, man, they don't even look competitive. Now, the Giants don't either. So it's going to be a battle of the boring on Thanksgiving. It's going to be one of those games that you just have in the background, and you check in every now and then. Oh, the Giants they're winning. Well, who cares? Type of game. Like, enjoy your damn turkey. Nobody cares about the Giants-Dallas game on Thanksgiving. With that being said, if you are New York, that game will probably determine whether or not you end up with a first overall pick or a second overall pick or a fifth or sixth overall pick, right? The loser of that game, and really only the Giants can lose, because Dallas, they'll have won enough games where they're not they're 3-7. So let's say they end up 4 and whatever, like they have Dak Prescott, it doesn't matter. They're probably hoping to get like a Travis, honestly, like an Ashton Jenney would be awesome for them, kind of like what the Lions did with Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, he'd be sick for them. Like, Dallas always built through their running game. They always had Zeke Elliott, just a monster. Tony Pollard obviously was great for them. Jenney for them with Dak and CeeDee Lamb, that's a combination that they probably want to see, and they're gonna bring in another head coach probably after this year. I know Mike McCarthy's contract is expiring, so Dallas is gonna have a whole new look in 2025 for sure. But looking at Jacksonville, looking at Tennessee, Cleveland, and Vegas, what do their schedules look like? So the Jaguars play the Texans, the Titans, the Jets, the Raiders, the Titans again, and the Colts. Now, the Jaguars are a really bad team led by Mac Jones. I don't think Trevor Lawrence plays another snap this year. Can they beat the Texans? No. Can they beat the Titans? maybe if they get lucky. The Jets, I mean, anyone could beat the Jets right now. They're doing Jet stuff. The Raiders, yes, they could beat the Raiders. The Raiders are really bad too. They're maybe equally as bad. I'd say probably just slightly better because Jags defenses, they've given up. Also, their coaching staff, I mean, they got to fire everybody. They're going to clean sweep that entire front office and that entire coaching staff soon enough. The Titans, again, Colts, like they're winnable teams, but Jaguars are that bad. The Titans play the Texans, but they're going to lose. The Commanders, they're going to lose. The Jaguars, they could win, which is good for the Giants, by the way. One of those two teams, the fact that the Jaguars and Titans play each other twice the remainder of the year is really good for the Giants because it means that one of those teams is not going to be in the way. And both of those teams, obviously the Jaguars don't need a quarterback because they have Trevor Lawrence, and they probably won't go in that direction. They'll probably draft him a playmaker. But the Titans definitely could use a quarterback. I think that, that's going to be an interesting situation. The Giants win either way because one of those two teams will drop below where the Giants are picking most likely. So we don't have to worry about the Titans most likely. The Jaguars, yes, they're probably going to lose those games. The Browns have a really hard schedule. The Browns may draft a quarterback. Anthony and I were talking about this yesterday. Are the Browns going to do Brown stuff, or are they going to stay the course of Deshaun Watson, who has a $73 million cap hit next year and in 2026? They can't bench him. Like, I know he just tore his Achilles, but they literally cannot bench Deshaun Watson. He is making too much money. His dead cap money, his dead cap hats are ridiculous. Like, they could bench him, learn a thing or two from the Giants, but they're probably better off taking a Jalen Milroe in the bottom of the first, second round, and then developing him for 2 years or a year to beat out Deshaun Watson. Because that's probably in their best interest, getting a playmaker in the first round, then getting a Milroe in the second, who I think probably ends up in that fringe, back end of the first round, early second round range. And then of course you have, and by the way, their schedule: Steelers, Broncos, Steelers again, Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens. They're not winning another game, the Browns. If they do, it's going to be an absolute miracle for the Giants. I just don't see how they win another football game. Crazy things happen. Maybe they get lucky. Maybe end of the year, the Ravens have the 1 seed locked up or 2 seed locked up, and they just bench all their starters. Maybe the Giants get lucky in that way. They just bench all their stars. Lamar takes a week off. Derrick Henry takes a week off, and the Browns manage to get a win there, again against the Ravens. So that would be the saving grace for the Giants. The Raiders, on the other hand, Broncos L, Chiefs L, Bucks maybe an L, Falcons, they're kind of crap in the bed right now, the Falcons, so you never know. Jaguars Raiders is the game that may decide the fate for the Giants in week 16. And then they play the Saints, which Saints aren't very good. They could be beaten, and the Chargers will walk all over the Raiders. So there's a lot that's going to happen here with these schedules. The Giants have the Bucks, Cowboys, Saints, Ravens, Falcons, Colts, Eagles. I think the only team they beat here is the Cowboys. If they even beat the Cowboys, that could be the determining factor. But, with that being said, these schedules are very good for the Giants because they have a lot of them. A lot of the Raiders, Jags, Titans are playing each other throughout the rest of this year. The Browns are the only team that's kind of has a really tough road the rest of the way. Dolphins, maybe a beatable team, but they're not scoring that much right now. Injury may hurt them a lot. So, Anthony, looking at these schedules, I see a lot of opportunity for the Giants. I think these teams are going to win some games. Those teams, Jags, Titans, and then the Raiders, they're going to win 3 or 4 games, put the Giants in a spot where they could sneak their way into that top 1 or 2. But I do think that the Jags ultimately hang on to the number 1 spot, meaning that the Giants will have a chance to move up. And that's the second best case scenario because the Jaguars are going to move out of that position most likely.
Yeah, I don't think that it's impossible, though, for the Giants to end up with a number 1 overall pick. I agree with you. It's very likely that the Jaguars end up picking first overall. And in that case, I think they trade down. I think they're going to stick with Trevor Lawrence. They're going to blow it up. They're going to fire their head coach. They're going to bring in somebody new and hopefully try and get Trevor Lawrence to reach his potential. What would help them do that? Well, how about a boatload of draft capital and a first-round pick and an additional first-round pick in next year's draft? I wrote an article this morning, Alex, because I saw one from the Draft Network, and I was kind of analyzing a trade that they made, a mock trade that they made in their latest mock draft that had the Giants trading up from 4th overall to 1st overall for Shedeur Sanders. Now, it was a very interesting mock trade because, honestly, the package was very similar to the one that the Giants gave up to move from 4th to 1st back in 2004 for Eli Manning. I drew that similarity in my analysis of the trade, kind of just saying, hey, we've heard a lot of chatter about Deion Sanders potentially not letting his son go to certain teams. Same things that we heard back in 2004 with Archie and Eli Manning, and now we get mock trades basically carbon copying the exact same thing that happened 20 years ago. History does like to repeat itself, so I will be circling back to that one as we get closer to April, closer to the draft. I think that's going to be a very interesting mock trade to keep an eye on, especially if the Giants end up picking somewhere in that 4 to 5 range while the Jaguars are picking first overall. Again, like you said, the Jaguars picking first overall. If it's not the Giants, that's the best case scenario because they're very likely to trade out of that pick and the Giants can move up and take whichever quarterback they desire. However, another thing that you clearly mentioned and went through in great detail, the amount of teams looking for a quarterback is insane. If you're going through this top 10, Alex, Jacksonville doesn't need one, but then Tennessee probably takes one. Cleveland, we'll see. Like you said, the Deshaun Watson situation is a little bit hairy. Las Vegas is definitely taking one. New England is fine. The Jets, I think, possibly and almost probably will be in the market for a quarterback. The Carolina Panthers, I think, also will be in the market. The Cowboys, I don't think they're in the market for a quarterback, but Jerry Jones, you never know with him. He could shock you at any moment. And then the New Orleans Saints, I think, will be in the market for a quarterback. So it's going to be a very competitive top 10. And like you mentioned, and going through the schedules was a really great practice because it helped me realize how much competition there really is for this number one pick and for these top quarterbacks, but also helped me realize that the path is pretty clear for the Giants. They will have opportunities down the stretch of the season. If they keep losing games, there will be other games to keep an eye on that can break their way and help push them up towards the number one overall pick. But what's it going to come down to, Alex? Whether or not the Giants win some games. That's what it's going to come down to. Can Tommy DeVito pick up some wins down the stretch, and what does that do to our draft stock? We lived this last year. We are now sitting in the exact same situation that we were in last season. However, Alex, we did lose this year's version of the Patriots game. We lost to the Carolina Panthers last week. That, I think, is going to be the saving grace of this entire equation because I think the Giants have more than one winnable game left on the schedule. You mentioned that you really only think they beat Dallas. I think that Dallas is a toss-up, but I also think that the Giants game with the Saints is a toss-up. I think that's something that they could possibly win. And I hate to say this, I think the Colts could be winnable, and I think that the Bucs this next weekend could be winnable. Now, hear me out. I know that the Bucs have a phenomenal offense, incredibly good team. They haven't been playing well lately, though. They've been in a slump, and the Giants making a change at quarterback, hoping for a spark. Brian Daboll now coaching for his life. This could be one of those games where the Giants play upset, and maybe they do get the better of the Buccaneers and ruin the Tampa Bay playoff hopes. So I'm not predicting a win. I'm just saying this Giants team is now a little bit frisky. They're a little bit of a pest now with a new quarterback and a coach basically standing on one leg. They might end up winning some of these tough games down the stretch, but are winnable games, like this Buccaneers game, like that Saints game. So if you are a Giants fan hoping for the number one overall pick, you need to circle those games and hope that the Giants get blown out in them. However, if you are one who wants Brian Daboll back, those are the games that the Giants could win in order to help Brian Daboll keep his job for 2025 and possibly beyond if he drafts the right quarterback this upcoming offseason. But it's very interesting to point out, Alex, the Giants do have some winnable games on their schedule. How afraid are you of that, of the Giants actually picking up some wins here, whether it be because Tommy DeVito throws up the pinch in the air and sprinkles some salt on the cutlets, or if it just be because the Giants defense has a really good game, whatever the case might be, there are definitely winnable games on the schedule. How much does that put fear into you that the Giants are going to play their way out of a top draft pick like they did last year?
I mean, it's the worst case scenario, like objectively speaking. If the Giants play themselves out of a position to draft Sanders or Ward, you have to now sell the farm to get the first overall pick. And, assuming, like, let's say the Jaguars have that pick, you're going to have to give your first round pick in 2026, which is expected to be a really strong draft class, So the Giants are positioning themselves. They've been positioned. Even when we have a chance to get a quarterback in a weak draft class, and have to give up our first round pick in 2026, a stronger draft class. Like, only the Giants could find a way to position themselves to be losers in a winning situation long term. Like, only the Giants could pull off this type of mayhem that they've somehow plummeted into. Now, that's not to say that Sanders or Ward won't be our saving grace. Maybe they are, and best case scenario, one of those two players, whoever they end up having conviction in, depending on if Joe Shane and Brian Daboll are even here next year, whoever they have conviction in, if they pan out, that 2026 first round pick we can kiss it goodbye. I don't care about it. Doesn't matter, right? Because the $8 million you're going to save next year by not having your first round pick, obviously that's money allocated to that selection. The money that you have saved from Daniel Jones now being off the books and the dead money off the books, you can spend to make up for the talent lost by not having a first round pick. You can spend on an NFL ready player, a player that's proven in the league already. So, there are ways to offset that value loss. It sucks. It does, because your rookie quarterback, you're expecting to kind of have a high pick, and that definitely hurts because, Jags now have that. They probably are really bad next year again, and they have another first-round pick, and they're able to really, go all in, but who knows? That's not my concern. I don't really care about the Jags. It's more so about what the Giants have. So, at this point in time, losing out the rest of the season is in the best interest of their long-term hopes. Now, it's also fair to mention Brian Daboll reportedly by multiple accounts now is coaching for his job. The Giants cannot afford to look like a mess. Is Tommy DeVito going to be better than Daniel Jones? We hope, but we also hope they still lose, right? Like, we hope that Brian Daboll shows that he can maximize a young quarterback with, look, let's be honest, Tommy DeVito, we're not expecting him to be a franchise quarterback. We just want him to look like he actually can get better, because if he looks like he can improve, if he looks like he can even operate this offense to a level of competency, it means that Brian Daboll isn't necessarily the problem. It means that Daniel Jones was the problem, right? They just need to prove that. And the rest of this season is going to be about proving that Daniel Jones was holding back the offense and it wasn't Brian Daboll's doing. That Tommy DeVito can even upgrade this offense slightly, and he's an undrafted player from last year with minimal ceiling. That's all we need to. That's all Brian Daboll needs to show, that they're not a disaster, they're not a mess. They were just being held back by their quarterback. That will give John Mara enough proof to say, if we can go get a Cam Wardner-Sanders who has so much more talent, so much more upside, a higher floor, Brian Daboll can be the solution here. That's what the goal is here. To be in range to get that quarterback, but also show that DeVito is better than Daniel Jones and that the offense can look better. Just a semblance of talent will help with that, right? That's kind of how I feel about what the rest of the season looks like. Ideal scenario, we lose out, but the offense looks better and DeVito shows any sense of competency, because that will prove that Daboll is not the problem for the most part.
Yeah, and that's the ideal scenario if you want Brian Daboll back. And I know that there are a lot of fans in our comment sections who do not want Brian Daboll back and they want him fired. And I want to make this point about this. Actually, first of all, side note, the New York Jets just fired general manager Joe Douglas. That's huge for this episode that we are discussing, because that probably means Aaron Rodgers not coming back next year. Jets definitely going to get into the quarterback market if the dominoes do fall that way. So big blockbuster just happened. Big breaking news from Adam Schefter of ESPN. Joe Douglas on the outs. The Jets, man, what a shit show. What a massive mess of an organization they are. Very sad to watch them just crumble like this in the span of a few weeks. Maybe Robert Saleh wasn't the problem. Maybe he was. I don't know. I think Woody Johnson, their owner, is a ridiculous man. I think he is the problem. I think he meddles way too much. Anyway, I don't want to go on about the Jets. Back to what I was saying about the New York Giants. But it actually is something that relates to this Jets news. And when you're looking at what the Jets just did, firing a head coach midseason, now firing their GM, this is what I need to say, Alex. The last thing that I want to see the Giants do is fire the head coach and allow the general manager to hire another head coach. Because you know what happens then? A roster gets forced upon a head coach, right? There's no synergy. Bring them in as a package deal. That's what the Giants did with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, and that was the right thing to do. But what they did back in 2020, well, they had Dave Gettleman hired in 2018. He brings in Pat Shurmur as the head coach. And then after 2 years, he fires Pat Shurmur. Despite giving Pat Shurmur a terrible roster, and despite Pat Shurmur getting a great rookie season out of Daniel Jones, Pat Shurmur gets fired. And then what happens? Dave Gettleman is allowed to hire another head coach. And what does he do? He misses again on the head coach and forces his roster upon that head coach, Joe Judge. Joe Judge was very clearly not happy with the roster that he was given. He was actually pretty vocally, critical of the roster that he was given against Dave Gettleman. He was subtle about it, but he was critical of it. And that's what I don't want to see happen. I don't want to see Joe Schoen take his roster and force it on another head coach, because that's what happened back in 2020. Daniel Jones was forced onto Joe Judge. Joe Judge basically took this job because he was one of the few head coaching candidates that was like, fine, I will do whatever the GM wants. I don't know if I'll ever get this opportunity again. I will coach Daniel Jones. And they forced Daniel Jones upon Joe Judge in that 2020 draft. Yes, they landed Andrew Thomas, but had they had a head coach who wasn't married to the regime, or a GM who wasn't married to his quarterback, Maybe they reboot and they take Tua or they take Justin Herbert. Who knows? Like we could play this revisionist history and it's really tough to do. But I don't want to see something like that unfold again, where 5 years from now we're playing revisionist history and we're going back in time and we're like, oh man, what if we didn't fire Dable? What if we would have hired this guy? If you're going to fire one, fire them both, clean house, clean sweep. The coaching's been bad this year. The roster's been terrible as well. Yes, the draft class from this 2024 NFL draft has been excellent. That shouldn't be enough to exonerate Joe Schoen for signing Daniel Jones to that contract. So, if you are going to fire Dable, you better hold the general manager just as accountable, because I think the GM is far more to blame than Brian Dable, the head coach, for the Giants' recent losing over the past 2 years. I mean, we are talking about 2022 head coach of the year, Brian Dable. We are talking about Brian Dable, who last year was thrown an undrafted rookie quarterback in the middle of the season as his starter and picked up wins down the stretch. You said it, Alex. We need to see whether or not Brian Dable could take a young talent and develop it. I thought that he proved that last year with Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito was probably the absolute worst case scenario for any head coach to be handed. Yeah, your starter's down, your backup's down. Here's this undrafted rookie who has never played a snap, who wasn't even with you in training camp. Go ahead, take that third stringer and try and win games. And somehow Brian Dable did. He won some of those games, which I thought was just incredible. I thought we sung Brian Dable's praises then, and if he does it again, we will sing Brian Dable's praises while we cry about our draft positioning like we did last year. But I think that he's proven he can develop young quarterback talents. The Giants just need to give him an opportunity to. So, like I said, if they're going to hold anybody accountable, hold them both accountable. Just admit that you missed on both of them and you need to restart. Or give them both one more year. They'll be going into the fourth year of their contracts. They both signed 5-year contracts, Brian Dable and Joe Schoen. So really, if you want, you can let them play out their contracts. You can let them go to year 5 and then just let them walk away. You don't have to re-sign them. Or you fire them after the fourth year when they only have 1 year remaining on the deal. After 4 years, you should know by then. But right now, I don't think we have all of the answers that we need to properly evaluate Brian Dable for the long term. I think that he should stay, but if he doesn't stay, I don't want Joe Schoen to stay either. So I wanted to just put that out there. It's been on my mind. The more we talk about the draft positioning, I wanted to make that point. Alex, what are your thoughts on that point? Do you agree with me? If you're keeping one, do you keep both? Can you fire one and keep the other? How do you ultimately feel about that? I know that it's a little off topic, but as we look to the draft and we talk about losing games, it's only going to become more relevant as the weeks go by.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can fire one of them. I think they are a package deal, and they were when they hired him. That was part of the problem that John Mara kind of went through when he hired two guys from the same organization, that they came together. They came as best friends. They came as buddies. They came as a connection, right? Like, you make it really hard to fire one of those guys. Because they make these decisions together. They have all these. I mean, how many times did we see Brian Dable and Joe Schoen in closed door meetings, just them two, talking about how they were going to go about this team, whether it was constructing the offensive line or free agents or drafting? Like, I know there's a lot of other people that have their hands in the pie here, but we saw a lot on Hard Knocks of those two guys just chopping it up, talking about the roster, and they're connected at the hip. And I know the GM and head coach should be. Like, that's not a rare, unique thing. They should be connected at the hip. But they come from a lineage of friendship. This is not a work relationship. They're friends, and then they work together. So I don't think Joe Schoen has the balls to fire him, to be quite honest with you. I don't think that he's gonna have. I mean, he barely had the balls to let Saquon Barkley leave. He barely had the balls to stand up to John Mara. I don't know how he's going to have the balls to fire his best friend, who's the head coach of the team he's playing. You know what I mean? Like, but they're both equally as liable. Like, let's not dance around that topic. Like, they're both equally at fault for the disaster class this team has faced, right? So why would you keep one and fire the other? Like, they both should be fired. If you fire one of them, you got to clean house, because they're both liable for this mess, which is why I think that they're going to keep both of them, because they're a package deal. So, the next couple of weeks, we're going to see how it goes. I will say this. This is kind of what I was thinking about mock drafts this morning, and Anthony, we were talking about it before the podcast, and I'm thinking about, like, okay, if the Giants do end up trading up with Jacksonville to get whatever quarterback, it could be Cam Ward or it could be Shadur Sanders, whatever. Who doesn't matter. It's irrespective of the point. Second round, they go get a receiver. Now you have a young offense with a young rookie quarterback with Malik Neighbors, a rookie receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson is still on his rookie deal, Theo Johnson on his rookie deal, and an offensive line that, for the most part, is pretty cost efficient. You got you have John Michael Schmidt's rookie deal. Runion's making next like $10 million for a guard. It's a good contract, good player. You bring back Van Roten. Maybe you allocate a little bit more money to an upgrade at guard. You try to find a value grab and maybe Greg Van Roten becomes like your kind of utility piece. You have Jermaine Illuminor, who's a good starting right tackle, and you still have Andrew Thomas, right? And maybe you draft like a swing tackle in like the 3rd or 4th round because you have to develop somebody. Maybe Evan Neal ends up becoming that. Who knows? So, at that point, you have a rookie contract. And Tyrone Tracy, by the way, still, you're starting running back. You have a rookie quarterback with all of your top playmakers on rookie contracts. That is how you start a rebuild. That is how you prepare for the future, because now you can develop these players, rise these players up with each other over the course of several years. Now you build continuity. The Giants, unfortunately, have no sense of continuity. They let players go, they cut players, they trade players, they do stupid shit all the time. They need a sense of continuity. They need to build, and they can't just give up after a year. They got to set the foundation with young talent and then let them grow together and get them involved. You still have Jalen Hyatt, who's basically not even seeing the field these days, right? Like last week was the most we saw because Slate wasn't playing. You have a young nucleus of talent, and on the defensive side, you got Nubin, you got Banks, you obviously have still Okereke there, you still have Dexter Lawrence, you still have Kayvon Thibodeau, you have some really solid young talent, Andrew Phillips, and you'd probably go out and you sign a cornerback, a veteran leader in that secondary, and things kind of galvanize and come together. But that offense has to be a young nucleus. It has to be a young core of playmakers on rookie contracts because it allows you to spend money in free agency to address those more pressing needs. When you have so many needs, older players that are not performing up to par, and you have to cut them, eat dead money, all this, it becomes a cycle of just disaster. The Giants having a young nucleus, cost-controlled, rookie contracts allows them to spend at critical positions to upgrade because you don't have to worry about the financial burden of paying Daniel Jones $40 million per season or paying Kenny Golladay $17 million per. You know what I mean? Like, that's how you really start a rebuild.
Yeah, and your great points all around. The last point that I'll make on the Daniel Jones contract that you just kind of alluded to, I've said this before, but now that he's been benched, I didn't say it in yesterday's episode. When Ralph Vacchiano said to me on social media that the Daniel Jones contract was a bargain and that it didn't hinder them from doing what they wanted to do in free agency, that was the biggest bag of bullshit that I've ever been sold. I mean, seriously? It didn't hinder them in free agency. Meanwhile, he has the second highest cap hit. So I'm just kind of dancing on the grave of that one right now. Just needed to kind of, have some fun with that one because, seriously? Didn't hinder them in free agency? What's up with the cornerback room? They don't have a CB1 because they had Daniel Jones under contract. So, not a bargain. I think we got that point now. I think it's officially safe to say, Alex, that the Daniel Jones contract was not a bargain. So, again, dancing on the grave of that one. That was always infuriating to me. I just don't understand how people had that thought process. But, alas, the nightmares are over. We're moving on. We are now moving forward and looking ahead to the 2025 NFL Draft. Like I said, Shedeur Sanders mock trade, that was very interesting. We could probably do a whole nother episode just talking about that, Alex. That might be a lot of fun to just kind of go through a mock trade. It's very early here in November, but it's still kind of fun to just look at those projections, talk about should the Giants give up a future first? Should they only give up their current first? That's going to be a lot of fun to dive into. And honestly, it's a long, winding road between now and April, but man, it's going to be fun. We were even talking about some of the wide receivers in this draft class this morning over text. Excited to take a look at some of those guys as well. So a lot of fun stuff to be coming on this channel throughout the next couple of months. Don't tune out just because the Giants suck, because we're not only talking about the Giants right now, we are talking about the Giants in the future. So plenty of great content planned. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.